Today, I wanted to talk about really what motivates me and what is a huge part of the impetus in me doing this work, specifically around working with complex trauma and dissociative disorders. I really frame the conditions and their existence as a humanitarian crisis. We know that the vast majority of people in their lifetime are going to experience a trauma. But what about children who begin experiencing trauma very young and then collectively, socially, we fail to protect them? And so the existence of dissociative disorders and complex PTSD are rooted in that. It's a humanitarian issue, and socially, we are unable, no, we are not unable, we are unwilling to really do what's right for children to protect them. And then, with the great irony being that as adults, they've developed this adaptation in response to their suffering, that adaptation then becomes controversial, it becomes sensational, it becomes denied, etc. That's an exceptional form of cruelty in my mind. There's a quote that I really like that I use in my trainings almost every time. To not have your suffering acknowledged is really an unspeakable form of violence. So when we deny the existence of a dissociative disorder or the existence of complex PTSD or minimize it, we are actually doing a lot of harm just by doing that. Um, so, and I really, what I kind of wonder is if perhaps our unwillingness to intervene is also our unwillingness to see and to know what's really going on underneath of our noses to children throughout their development. Because if we know and we don't do anything, we are culpable. And in all honesty, I do believe that socially we're culpable and simultaneously structural dissociation in the form of DID or OSDD really almost mimic or mirror the social reaction to profound, layered, ongoing child abuses that occur in such ways that we're not able to really comprehend that that's a reality in the world. So there's a collective looking away from this reality because it's going to be very difficult to intervene. It's complicated to intervene, and it's necessary to intervene. So every person living with DID was once a child trying to survive circumstances that no child should have to endure. And when the world dismisses or mocks the condition or is entertained by it, we risk denying not only the diagnosis, but also the reality of the childhood experience that made those adaptations necessary. And therefore, this is fundamentally a human rights issue. It goes beyond the therapy room and is rooted in what is happening socially. So, DID is evidence of an adaptation. It's not evidence of weakness. It is a drive to survive in the context of what would seem to be unsurvivable in terms of psychological death or moral wounding. Children cannot escape their conditions. They depend on their caregivers for survival. Their nervous systems adapt to impossible circumstances, and dissociation helps preserve the functioning when there is no external safety. So it's not DID, OSDD, and I include CPTSD in this conversation because that is also rooted often in developmental and layered trauma where people, us socially, we fail to intervene and do anything about it. So also just recognizing that every diagnosis represents a child. So one of the most powerful points around this is that every adult that we see with one of these conditions was not a child from the beginning. I mean, was not an adult from the beginning. Obviously, they were once a child. And behind every diagnosis then is a person, is a child, a developing brain, a nervous system, someone who deserved protection, was worthy of love, etc., and did not receive those things. Those things in and of themselves, though, are painful and yet survivable. The real injury, or one of the real injuries, I don't want to minimize the kinds of injuries that produce these conditions, but those kinds of conditions in the context of social denial is very painful and also renders one powerless because who's going to do anything if they don't believe you in the first place? And denial, again, in my view, is a form of denying culpability for not doing anything to protect someone. And not just someone, but the most vulnerable in our population. Uh, so again, the society says this condition can't be real, while simultaneously we can acknowledge that child abuse exists, trafficking exists, torture exists, organized abuse exists, severe neglect exists. All of these things exist, and yet we cannot really believe the consequences of those contexts and that kind of exposure to trauma. So, human rights on the other side, we look at human rights and what they include. They include the right to safety, protection from torture, protection from exploitation and abuse, dignity, of course, access to health care, freedom from discrimination. Children who later develop DID experience profound violations of these rights throughout their lifetime. And as adults, then, may face barriers such as a delayed diagnosis and therefore delayed treatment, stigma, disbelief, of course, inadequate access to acknowledged treatment, and misunderstanding of healthcare. And when I think about the intricacies of a system, of somebody's internal life that they've developed to protect them in the context of this kind of abuse, again, it really does kind of mirror the external denial. So there's the world that's saying that didn't happen and or your condition isn't real, but also then the person that's living with their own story uh, denies their own reality. Again, it's kind of a mirror. And I wonder what would be different if the outside world believed, did something, acknowledged and validated pain, and supported recovery. I think a lot of things would be very different, not just in the individual, but in the world. Because when we interrupt trauma, we make positive change not just within the person, but also for generations to come. So there's a lot of hope and possibility and richness in making a decision collectively to do something about these challenges now so that we can affect ourselves. And then there's altruism and that we care about those who will come after us. And we want the world to continue to grow and evolve into being a better place. Interrupting trauma, in my view, is one of the biggest things and the most concrete and foundational things that we can do to generate social change. So I know that's a deep, well, I think it's deep. It feels deep to me and it feels profoundly important. It's this intersection between social work and clinical work, in that I look at the person in context and the current context of addressing childhood abuse and sexual abuse in general is really not great. We could do so much better. And if we acknowledge it as a starting point, recognize the extent to which it happens, and decide to do something, we collectively can change the world. I hope that's helpful, and I will talk with you soon. Take good care.